Today you will have the privilege of learning about the fascinating country of Russia. You'll learn about its government, its economy, its laws, its religion, and its urban life. First branch of government we will be addressing today is the executive branch. This consists of the president and the prime minister. While both hold authority, the president is the higher figure. He commands basic domestic and foreign policy for Russia. He can also appoint the prime minister. He issues decrees, he can veto bills, fix issues of citizenship, pardon crimes, and award state decorations. The Russian president, much like the American president, is voted into office by the people. He or she will hold the term for 6 years. The parliament is divided into two sections, the Federation Council and the State Duma. The Federation Council is not elected by the people. Instead, representatives are chosen by a higher authority. The Federation Council can vote on laws, impeach the president when necessary, and declare the outcome of a presidential election. They make choices for the armed forces outside of Russia. The State Duma, unlike the Federation Council, is voted in by the people. They are allowed to vote on and draft laws. The judicial branch of the government is allowed to determine whether a law is constitutional or unconstitutional. If it's found to be unconstitutional, it becomes unenforceable until changes can be made. They also hear criminal and civil cases for citizens of Russia. What are some pros and cons for the Russian system? Well, there are a lot of checks and balances similar to ours, and the people are allowed to vote for both the State Duma and the president, so the people have a lot of power. Unfortunately, the president also has a lot of power because he has the ability to dissolve the State Duma, meaning that he can get rid of them if he doesn't like the people there, and he appoints the prime minister, which means he can just appoint someone to the executive seat who will just agree with everything he says. So in that sense, the president may have a little bit too much power. So, how do Russian laws get made? Well, first the State Duma has to draft or write the law, and then, if the majority of them agree that it would be a good idea for the Russian people, it gets passed on to the Federation Council. If the Federation Council also agrees it would be a good idea, it's passed on to the president. If they don't agree and the majority don't vote on it, then the two houses must come to a compromise. The president can easily veto any bills or laws.
There is a law at the municipal level that allows subtle protest if you vote against all on ballots because you don't agree with anybody that's voting. Another law is that foreign workers have to prove their worth by passing exams in Russian history, language, and law. And Russian-controlled foreign companies and Russians with accounts in foreign bank accounts have to share their statements with authorities back home. Many of these Russian laws are unfair because they interfere with parts of Russian life that are outside the country.
So, what happens to lawbreakers in Russia? Well, if you break the law or the criminal code and are found guilty, you go to courts where your punishment is decided. The punishment is in order to ensure that social justice is restored and that the convicted person is reformed and able to go on and live their lives. And it is also to prevent further crime.
How well does it function? Russia's GDP, gross domestic product, falls 4.6% in 2015 and 2016. Fortunately, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, says economy should return to growth. Poverty rates from 2000 to 2014 were going down, but on the rise again. 3.1 million poor people went to 19.2 million in 2015. Russia is a market-based economy, meaning that the prices depend on supply and demand. Russia is also a status economy, meaning that the highest officials have the highest concentration of the nation's wealth and that they have the highest influence. The currency for Russia is 1 Russian ruble, which is equivalent to 0.015 US dollars. Because Russia is a market-based economy, they encourage trade. Most of their trading partners were Germany, Italy, China, Turkey, Poland, Switzerland, United Kingdom, United States, and Finland. Russia provides most needs for other countries in oil and oil products, gas, timber, machinery, and equipment. Russia is very dependent on oil, natural gases, metals such as steel, primary, aluminum, and others.
The average monthly income for Russians is $700. The budget for this is usually used with clothing, food, rent, and then services such as a chiropractor, a doctor, or a dentist.
Your mom.
Some typical problems faced by city dwellers were crime, environmental pollution, overcrowding in houses, shortages of apartments and houses. Another major social problem was alcohol abuse. The government also had low spending on healthcare and medicine. 94% of the adult population owned less than $10,000, and the richest 1% of the population controlled about 71% of the wealth. Many middle-class people lived in cramped apartments, and a bunch of high-class people could actually own homes and afford to pay rent. Moscow was considered the center of the rich population, and it was also the capital of Russia. Many parents with work and more than one child were considered part of the poor class.
Orthodox Christianity is the most popular religion that is practiced by 75% of the population in Russia. Orthodox Christianity is one of the main Christian groups. The others are Roman Catholic and Protestant. They have the same beliefs as other Christian churches, that God revealed himself in Jesus Christ, also a belief in the incarnation of Jesus Christ, his crucifixion and death. It's substantially different from other churches in the way of life and worship, also in certain aspects of theology. Some everyday religious practices include the practice centers on the emotive experience of liturgy that is chanted every day. They pray about and sometimes weep before sacred images to repent, shun sin, and turn to God and Him alone. They pray the traditional Orthodox prayer, and they pray the Lord's Prayer before meals. A very important part of their religion is fasting. They fast on Wednesdays in the remembrance of the betrayal of Christ, and on Fridays in the remembrance of his crucifixion and death. Lenten fasting is to focus on God and others while worrying less about ourselves and praying and caring more for the poor, and also to learn to control emotions of anger and jealousy. Death is very important to Orthodox Christians. Because of this, in Russian culture, embracing death is a very important thing to do. Russians do certain things to prevent the dead from staying or returning. For example, mirrors are covered with black cloth, and the body is laid out in ways that facilitate the ushering out of the spirit. The mourners accompany the deceased from home to church and from the church to the cemetery.